You know, I might start having better luck if I just pick it randomly. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. I got a new hoodie, Grossi, and today we are going to be breaking down and predicting every single game in the Week 3 lineup. Last week, a minor improvement. I went 9-7 after going 8-8 the previous week, which is not much better. So I'm 17-15 on the year, which again, rookie numbers. I'm hoping to improve as the year goes on. However, someone who does not need to improve is our number one person with a record of 27-5. We have Sanch Ranch. A big shout out to you over in the Pick'em League. If you would still like to join, it's completely and totally free. The link is in the description. And so let us get started with our Thursday night football game. You got the New York Giants taking on the San Francisco 49ers. The Giants, well, they decided to show up in the second half against the Cardinals.
You're late.
A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
After getting their ass completely, totally kicked up and down the field, going down 28-7, the Giants roared back. Daniel Jones wound up having a phenomenal second half, and they were able to claw their way back and get the win. Now, while it is impressive that they were able to get the win, it is against the Cardinals, who a lot of people predicted would be the worst team in the league, though I'm not sure that holds water anymore because they were competitive against the Commanders. But the Giants, I'm not sure they're a good football team right now. Saquon Barkley does have a chance to play on Thursday. It seems like it's just going to be a week-to-week kind of decision, and I imagine maybe he's not going to play on Thursday just so he can get that extra 10 days rest. Meanwhile, the San Francisco 49ers, they had a little bit of trouble with the LA Rams, in which Puka Nacua, damn man, he's looking pretty darn good, and after the 49ers just decimated the Steelers in week 1, on Sunday, they weren't able to decimate them, but they were able to get the win. Brock Purdy missing a couple of downfield throws, but overall, I think the 49ers are going to be just fine. This matchup, yeah, I don't see the Giants winning this game, but it is Thursday night, and maybe some crazy things will happen. It is prime time. I mean, hell, if you watch those Monday night games, you saw the craziness I'm talking about, but I am going to stick with the San Francisco 49ers here. I just think they're a much better football team, and hey, Giants, at least you're not 0-2. Following that, you got the Tennessee Titans taking on the Cleveland Browns. The Titans pulling off an overtime victory against the LA Chargers, in which Derrick Henry looked good, Ryan Tannehill was efficient, didn't turn the ball over like he did in week 1, and the Titans overall looked like a better team. Of course, the strength is going to come from that defensive line, and while the Chargers didn't have Austin Eckler, I still think it's an impressive win for Tennessee. Meanwhile, the Browns, watching the Browns versus Steelers on Monday Night Football was kind of like this. That was just bad. And the Browns not only didn't win on Monday Night Football, but they lost Nick Chubb for the remainder of the season. They brought in Kareem Hunt for a visit, and they just signed him to a 1-year deal this morning. And listen, that's going to help, but it's going to be tough to replicate the production of Nick Chubb. I just hope for a speedy recovery because, damn, man, he's one of my favorite players. He is just their entire offense, and it sucks to lose that caliber of player. However, looking at the Browns, their defense was pretty darn solid against Kenny Pickett and the Steelers, but their offense, was stinking up the place. Deshaun Watson, man, he looks slower. He was inaccurate at times, but I will give him credit because some of those sideline throws, especially those deep sideline passes to Elijah Moore or Amari Cooper, they were on the money. But it really kind of looks like it's not going to go so well for the Browns. Not only do they have those major injuries, but they're in a competitive division. And if the Bengals ever decide to wake up, watch out. This is going to be a tough game. I think you have two good defenses, and it's going to be a matter of who can move the ball better. I'm actually going to give it to the Titans because I think their offense is just a bit better than the Browns currently, especially without Nick Chubb. And so I'm going to go with the Titans in what is likely to be a defensive battle. Following that, you got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Detroit Lions. The Falcons Falcons fans, you did it. And I imagine this is how you're feeling after starting 2-0 for the first time since 2017.
This is exactly how I imagined it.
The Falcons came back against the Packers, down 12 points in the fourth quarter, utilizing Bijan Robinson and that amazing run game with Algier, and hell, even Desmond Ridder got in on the fun. The Falcons looked like a pretty darn good football team, and they're a young team. They're growing. I don't know if Desmond Ridder is the answer, but I do know that Bijan Robinson is that guy. If they can contain on defense and they can just rely on that run game and Desmond Ridder doesn't turn the ball over, the Falcons, they're a good upstart team. Meanwhile, the Detroit Lions shockingly falling to the Seattle Seahawks. A lot of people wrote off the Seahawks after week 1 and their loss to the Rams. But as I said before, it looks like the Rams are a better team than a lot of people give them credit for. But for the Lions, they suffered some pretty big injuries in that game. CJ Gardner-Johnson, unfortunately, is going to be out for the year with a torn pec, which is a big loss for that secondary. But I think the Lions overall are still going to be fine. This is actually going to be, I think, one of the better football games this weekend. It's being played at Ford Field, and I don't think the Lions are going to make the same mistakes that they did last week, and plus maybe the refs will give them a break. And so because of that, I'm going to be going with the Lions getting the W. However, I would not be surprised if Atlanta comes away with the win. Then you got the New Orleans Saints taking on the Green Bay mother-loving Packers. The Saints, yeah, it was a pretty bad game on Monday night against the Panthers. However, their defense looked great, and Chris Olave is just a stud. Unfortunately, they lost Jamal Williams, who is going to miss some time, and Alvin Kamara doesn't return from suspension until week 4. So that means heading into the game against the Packers, their offense are going to be down a few people. So that means going up against the Packers, not really having a run game, well, the Packers can't defend the run. So this is actually great for the Packers, not so great for the Saints. Meanwhile, the Packers, their home opener, I just hope David Bakhtiari can play, because there were rumors coming out and a lot of fans decided to believe that David Bakhtiari was thinking this before the Falcons game.
Oh, my football knee. Why? Can I have some corn nuts?
Turns out, unfortunately, his knee flared up again. The Packers are dealing with a bunch of injuries. Elton Jenkins is going to be week to week, though I imagine he's going to miss this Sunday. Then, of course, Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, are those guys going to play? It's all up in the air. The Packers losing to the Falcons, as I mentioned before, blowing a 12-point lead in the final quarter. Their offense and defense just completely imploded in that final quarter. And honestly, I don't know what to make of the Packers right now. Jordan Love is playing good football. He's efficient with the ball, hasn't turned it over, has 6 touchdowns, and that's great. But the Packers are a wounded team. And you look at that defense, they're struggling against the run. As I said before, though, the Saints, hopefully they're not going to really have too much of a run game this Sunday. This is a game the Packers kind of need to win in their home opener, because their next matchup is Thursday night against the Lions. And this is an NFC team, so if the Packers want a shot at making the playoffs, they got to beat teams like the Saints. I think this is going to be a tough matchup because Jordan Love is going up against the toughest defense he has faced thus far, but I am going to give the slight edge to the Packers just because of the lack of running game for the Saints, but I'm not going to lie. I am nervous about this game. Then you got the Denver Broncos taking on the Miami Dolphins. Broncos fans, yeah, this was them after the ending of that Commanders game.
My emotions! My emotions!
We even have some leaked footage of Russell Wilson at halftime.
Eating fresh, are we?
It was just a rough time. The Broncos had a major lead over the Commanders, blew it, then came back, threw a Hail Mary, connected, it's a touchdown, and then they don't get the 2-point conversion and a very questionable no call on pass interference. But for the Broncos, they start 0-2, and it's a rough time right now. Russell Wilson does look like he is improving, which is a good thing, but that offensive line is allowing him to get clobbered back there, so I don't really know about them. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, I know about the Dolphins. I love the Dolphins right now because they have won in 2 unique ways. One, they got into a shootout with the Chargers week 1, and then Raheem Mostert ran all over the Patriots week 2. I think the defense performed really well on Sunday Night Football, and here I think they're going to have a time against the Broncos. Though the Broncos defense can be challenging at times, I think Tua is not going to have a problem whether they want to run it or they want to throw it to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I think the Dolphins are going to have a pretty easy game here, and they're going to get the W. Then, this is going to be an interesting game. You got the LA Chargers taking on the Minnesota Vikings, and I have to imagine that both fan bases are getting ready for this matchup like this.
That's all for today. Read chapter 4.
This is rough. Both teams not expecting to start 0-2 on the season. The Chargers, they lost a close game to the Dolphins. Then they lose an overtime game against the Titans. The Vikings, they can't stop turning the ball over. Lost to the Buccaneers and then lost to the Eagles. And both these teams, they got issues. Both these teams, their QBs are playing well, but it just seems like either their defense or self-induced mistakes are the problem here. Justin Herbert, he's been playing out of his mind. Hopefully Austin Eckler will be back for this game. Keenan Allen had a really nice game against a good Titans defense last week. And the Vikings, they should be winning games. But again, they can't stop fumbling the ball away. It's being played in Minnesota, and one of these teams has to win. Unless it's a tie, which honestly is pretty possible for these two teams. I'm going to give the slight edge to the Chargers because I think they can put up a ton of points. Kirk Cousins has been playing pretty good, but until they can stop the bleeding, I'm going to have to go with LA. And plus, I'm not upset that the Vikings suck right now. Then you have an AFC East matchup between the New England Patriots and the New Jersey Jets. The Patriots starting 0-2 for the first time since 2001. And listen, they were able to crawl back against the Miami Dolphins, and I think Mac Jones is looking better. He's airing the ball out a bit more. The issue is he really doesn't have a ton of help. That offensive line is shaky at times, and they don't really have a true number one wide receiver. Devontae Parker is good, Juju Smith-Schuster's fine, Hunter Henry's okay, but they don't have that one guy, especially with Thornton, who's currently injured. The defense, they're going to be just fine, but that offense, they need to figure things out. Meanwhile, you take a look at the Jets. It was ugly times. After losing Aaron Rodgers in week 1 and having a miraculous victory against the Bills, they got their ass kicked by the Cowboys, and it just did not look good. And Jets fans watching Zach Wilson take the field again.
Take a look, it's in a book, reading rainbow, reading rainbow.
It's not pretty. Zach Wilson did not look good through 4 interceptions on the entire season. And honestly, the Jets are going to have to make a change at some point because that roster is just too talented to allow Zach Wilson to do, well, what he did last week to that team. This game, I think, is going to be a defensive battle. The Patriots are going up against a good defense with the Jets. But again, the Patriots are going to probably be able to take advantage of Zach Wilson. So because of that, I am going to give the edge to the Patriots. And unless Zach Wilson somehow figures it out, this could get ugly. Following that, you got the Buffalo Bills taking on the Washington Commanders. The Bills finally looked fantastic last week, destroying the Raiders. They played well on defense. Josh Allen played mistake-free football. And the most important thing, they ran the effing ball. Finally! The Bills, they were operating and firing on all cylinders. Meanwhile, the Commanders, they're getting off to a good start. A 2-0 record post the Dan Snyder departure, who's probably doing this right now.
I can't wake up Pierce. Is this gonna take an unexpected turn?
You have to know how to do it. Discrimination lawsuit.
Preposterous!
And the Commanders are a weird football team. They beat the Cardinals week 1. They had some trouble with it. And then week 2, they had that comeback victory against the Broncos. Was it more the Commanders crawling back, or was it the Broncos blowing it? We're going to find out as the season continues to move along. Though I will say, and I've said it many times, I am very concerned about the Commanders' offensive line or lack thereof. But Brian Robinson, phenomenal player. Scary Terry, absolutely. And Sam Howell is actually looking pretty darn good. And on top of that, their defense looked good last week. Chase Young really picked it up in that second half, and they're going to be hoping that that defense can return to a top 10, top 5 unit by the end of the year. However, I do think they're going to have their hands full with the Bills. If the Bills can play like they did last week, they are going to be tough to stop. And so because of that, I'm rolling with Buffalo this week. Then you have an AFC South matchup between the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Texans, CJ Stroud, he looked pretty darn good last week. And I think, honestly, Texans fans, that's the only thing you need to get out of this season. Do guys like Will Anderson look good, and is CJ Stroud your guy? I am a little concerned that Dameon Pierce isn't doing a whole lot, though your offensive line is not helping anybody. And there's some talented players on that defense and on the offensive side of the ball, but the Texans are just not putting it together right now. Meanwhile, the Jaguars, fans were screaming about that red zone offense last week.
That's your home! Are you too good for your home? Answer me!
Suck my white.
It was just an ugly, ugly game. The offense just didn't look good as soon as they got into the red zone. The defense looked actually pretty good against Patrick Mahomes. They just couldn't get it together when it counted, and because of that, they were unable to capitalize on good field position. I imagine they're going to have more success this week. I think they'll be able to take down the Texans and return to form, and because of that, I'm going with Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, and I imagine a better week this week. Following that, you got the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Baltimore Ravens. The Colts with Anthony Richardson getting 2 rushing TDs and then unfortunately leaving the game with an injury. Hopefully he recovers soon, but Gardner Minshew taking his place and looking pretty good, and most importantly, getting the win. Meanwhile, the Ravens, yes, they're still having injuries. OBJ banged up a little bit, but Lamar Jackson looked very, very good. They were efficient last week, picking up the win against the division rival Bengals. And listen, good defense, an efficient offense, especially looking at you, Zay Flowers, who looks to be a deep threat and looks to be their guy. I like the Ravens right now. If they can stay healthy, which is a big if, the Ravens can cause a lot of problems in the AFC. Meanwhile, here are Jonathan Taylor and the Colts, while plenty of teams like the Ravens could definitely use him.
Well, you guys can work it out.
Yeah, we will.
No, we won't.
I think Baltimore has a pretty big advantage, especially if Anthony Richardson is not playing on Sunday. So because of that, I am going to go with the Baltimore Ravens here. It's being played in Baltimore, so I think it's a good shot that they're going to be flying high. Following that, you got the Carolina Panthers taking on the Seattle Seahawks. The Panthers are the only team in the NFC South that do not have a 2-0 record.
It's okay.
It was a little bit of a tough watch. Bryce Young definitely has those flashes. He has that poise in the pocket, but he just doesn't have the support. The O-line is not there. The receivers like Jonathan Mingo are still developing, and after that, options are limited. And while their defense is pretty good, there's just not enough offensive firepower, and Frank Reich is not doing a great job calling those offensive plays. Meanwhile, the Seahawks had a great bounce-back victory against the Lions after losing to the Rams week 1. The Seahawks have to be feeling pretty good about themselves because the Rams looked better, and the Seahawks, most importantly, got the W against the Lions. Being played in Seattle, I think the Seahawks definitely have an advantage here, and until I see Bryce Young able to overcome the ineptitude of his offense, I'm going to have to go with Seattle here. Then, oh my God, you got the Chicago Bears taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Do we even have to talk about this game? Like, can we? Yikes. The Bears, 0-2, wishing that they could go back to the joys of preseason when they had hope. And Bears fans at this point are just looking for somebody to blame.
And if all we need is an scapegoat, I think we should just let this one go.
Justin Fields either doesn't have a lot of time. When he does have time, he's not making the right decision and taking sacks. And the offense is just not great. DJ Moore, loved the guy, but he is not able to overcome all the terribleness of that offense, the play calling. I don't know what anybody's doing over there. Oh, and by the way, their defense is bad too. Meanwhile, the Chiefs, they won, but as I said before, an ugly, ugly game. Chris Jones returned, which is a big boost to that defense, and as long as the offense cleans things up going forward, they should be just fine. This, I imagine, is going to be a massacre. It's being played in Kansas City, and yeah, Chiefs are gonna win. Sorry, Bears fans. Following that, you got, oh my God, another one. You got the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Arizona Cardinals. The Cowboys, well, they kicked the crap out of the Jets, like I said. Their defense looks for real. The offense didn't have to do a ton, but CeeDee Lamb looked really, really good. And Micah Parsons, good God, man, he's going to be contending for an MVP award if he keeps playing like that. Meanwhile, the Cardinals, they went up big against the Giants, and then not so much. And their fans, who actually had some hope for the past 2 weeks,
My life is nothing but a comedy.
not so good. The Cardinals blowing a big lead to the Giants, and they're in a weird spot right now, right? They're waiting for Kyler Murray to return, and I do feel bad for Zach Ertz right now, but it just doesn't seem like until he returns, there's going to be a lot of games that go the Cardinals' way. Here, I think the Cardinals are walking into a buzzsaw. I'm going to go with Dallas here. and may God have mercy on your soul. Then you have an incredibly exciting Sunday night football game that I'll be streaming. You got the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Vegas Raiders. The Steelers, yeah, you watched the game on Monday night. Wasn't pretty. The defense looked darn good. TJ Watt becoming the franchise leader in sacks, had a scoop and score for a touchdown. They were doing real well. The offense, a lot to be desired. They had a big play to George Pickens for a 70-plus yard touchdown, but Kenny Pickett struggled that entire evening, though he was pressured a lot. Taking on the Raiders, who they got their ass kicked by the Bills last week because that Raiders defense just could not stop Josh Allen and that Bills offense.
I attacked them using my additional notes.
It has no effect.
Devontae Adams dealing with an injury, thankfully doesn't seem to be too significant, but the Raiders just don't even have a run game to speak of right now. Their offensive line has actually been pretty good, but Jimmy Garoppolo I don't think is very inspiring, and the Raiders last week kind of looked like what we expected them to look like this season. Not too good. This game, it's going to be a challenge. You have a bad offense in the Steelers, but a good defense taking on a decent offense in the Raiders, and the defense, I think there's a lot to be desired. However, I am going to go with a surprise pick here, and I'm actually going to go with the Raiders. Just because I think their offense can put up a few more points than the Steelers, it's going to be a challenge going up against that defense, but yeah, I'm picking the Raiders, and I'm probably going to regret it. And with the first matchup on Monday night, you got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bit of a surprising matchup here in which you have two 2-0 teams. The Eagles, kind of expected. They took care of business against the Vikings because the Vikings were busy shooting themselves in the foot. DeAndre Swift had a really, really good game, and if he can stay healthy, watch out because that Eagles run game is going to be nasty. Meanwhile, the Buccaneers, their defense is looking very, very good. Baker Mayfield playing efficient, mistake-free football, and this actually might turn into a pretty solid game. I am curious to see how the Buccaneers defense does against Jalen Hurts and that offense, and also how that Bucs O-line holds up against that Eagles pass rush. So who knows? This could be a lopsided game. I do think the Eagles are going to get the win, but I think it is going to be a little bit closer than people anticipate. But for the Buccaneers, this is your proving ground. Being played in Tampa, this is your chance to show how good you actually are. And then finally, you got a Super Bowl rematch from a couple years ago. You got the LA Rams taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. The Rams, Puka, breaking all the records.
What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
And I got to admit, I was wrong about the Rams. Their offensive line has only allowed 1 sack the entire year. I know it's only 2 weeks, but they went up against the 49ers last week. That's pretty good. Matthew Stafford returning to form. You got Tutu Atwell and Puka just taking care of business. Their defense doesn't look half bad. And yeah, the Rams are playing pretty good right now. Meanwhile, the Bengals, nothing is going right. After only scoring 3 points week 1, they lost to another division rival last week against the Ravens, and that offense just looks anemic. They have no run game to speak of. Joe Burrow's not getting a ton of support, and they just don't have that same high-powered flair that they have been having the past few seasons. The one saving grace is that it is the Bengals. They have a ton of talent on that team, and they got off to a slow start, an 0-2 start to be specific, last season. So for the Bengals, they have to win this game because there are not a lot of must-win games week 3, but the Bengals cannot afford to start 0-3, especially in the AFC. I think this is going to be actually a really good game. I'm curious to see if the Bengals are going to have a little bit more success on offense. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say they figure it out here, and maybe Jamar Chase finally starts to have those good games. I'm going to pick the Bengals. However, I would not be surprised with the way that Cincinnati's been playing. The Rams pick up the win, but Kitty, you got to go meow Monday night. But those are my picks. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and best of luck this week. You can always find me at Tom Grossi Comedy on all the social media see down below. A big shout out and thank you to the Patreon and YouTube members for the extra support on this channel. It is greatly appreciated. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.